There's going to be some background fan noise because it's getting hot, and that's how this works this time of year. But with that being said, patch notes 12.13 for this episode of Let's Talk Jinx, the weekly Jinx video we do every Wednesday about anything to do with Jinx. So, with this one, there are no Jinx-specific changes. There are some other AD carry changes we might be able to talk about because matchup stuff will be interesting. First and foremost, though, the new champion, Nyla, however you want to pronounce it, will be hitting the Rift, and remember, they're a marksman, they're a melee marksman, so you're going to see them in the bot lane if they make it through pick ban. And so what we might do for next week's video is just kind of go over their abilities and how Jinx might, fare against fighting them in lane and stuff. But just be aware that this champion is in fact finally coming to the Rift, so there you go. Sivir, meanwhile, is also getting a mid-scope update. All abilities kind of have been adjusted. Their thinking is that Sivir has been dethroned as the queen of late game team fights, which is odd because personally I always saw her as like more of the queen of like utility. Her and Ashe being like the utility AD carries when it's more of a utility meta, with Ashe being able to still DPS and slow and stuff, but Sivir, like, her ult can boost an entire team. Her ult can make things like Olaf suddenly meta, at least in pro play and stuff, if you have the right coordination, right? Like, I always kind of, that's my just personal take. I never saw her as the queen of late game team fights. I always thought that was something more like a Caitlyn, or of course Jinx and stuff like that. But with that being said, so they did a mid-scope thing. Some of the stuff that are changing are base stats that won't be too noticeable in lane phase. Maybe the base health going down to 600 might be a little bit noticeable. Mana growth kind of going down and stuff like that, sure. But you have like some passive changes, things that decay, the boomerang blade, base damage is being adjusted. So there's a lot to go over here, honestly. And if you're Jinx in this scenario, one of the things you want to kind of probably note is there's a lot of reductions in some places and additions in other places. So specifically what you want to kind of watch out for is things like, it looks like the base damage on the boomerang blade has gone down, but like the AP ratio, for example, has gone up. Probably not going to be an AP Sivir you're going against in the bottom lane though, so overall it's going to be looking like it's weaker on its base damage. The cast time, meanwhile, looks like it's going from a quarter second to a quarter second down to 0 seconds with attack speed. So for some reason laning phase is going on long enough and she's building attack speed, the cast time is going to actually go down on that, and she might be throwing that out more often, because if I remember, the missile speed outwards is actually getting increased, but the return speed is getting decreased. So if you get hit by this on the outward, you still might be able to dodge it when it's coming back, because it's actually going to be slower. So like things like that in the laning phase when you're dealing with like Sivir's Q and stuff, little things that they've done like that are things as Jinx you're going to want to watch out for. The Ricochet, for example, I believe they changed it so that it's going to start targeting, it deals 80% damage against minions now, but it's going to now bounce back to targets that have already been hit, but only one additional time. So right now, it'll bounce like to you once, it's bouncing for like a minion wave or your team. Now, it'll bounce back to you a second time, so you want to be careful of that, because that's basically then double damage, but it can only hit you twice total. That's still double damage though, so be careful of that. Spell Shield. Blocking enemy ability with E no longer refunds mana, so you can kind of force Sivir to kind of use her mana pool now a bit more, because that's not going to refund. The way it is, if you timed it really well and you block something with her shield, it would refund the mana. So if you're using Zap to try and slow her to set up a gank as your jungler comes in, and she uses that, it's going to take up mana though, and if she needed that mana for something else, she suddenly won't have it. That can be nice, right? Stuff like that. If she tries to use a spell shield on your flame chomper, same thing. It's not gonna refund the mana. So the Sivers might have to be a little bit more careful with that. You won't be as Jinx though, so there we go. And then of course the ultimate's got some changes. Sivir no longer gains bonus attack speed when she's using the R. Sivir no longer gives her allies additional movement, a burst of movement speed. That's interesting. But now the basic attacks during R now reduce her basic ability cooldowns by half a second per attack. So the more attack speed she has, the more her other abilities are going to get cooled down while the ult's going. So post level 6, this is going to be interesting, because that is going to add a lot of utility back to her, because they want to make her more of a late game team fighter. So just think of it that way. Sivir, she's still going to have utility overall, but she's more, they want to make her more of like an AoE crit machine, kind of like Jinx. So there you go. Corki is not really played in the bottom lane, but just in case you ever see him in the bottom lane, the EAD scaling is being increased and the R base damage is being decreased, and the AP scaling is being decreased because they want to put some more AD back in him. I don't think that's going to send him into the bot lane, but if you see him in the bot lane, it's probably because the Gatling gun basically is going to be doing a ton of damage. You might want to watch out for that. But again, there wasn't any Jinx specific changes, so we're really only going other AD carry changes because of what you might have to deal with in the laning phase. And even then, the patch is actually kind of light. It's really Star Guardian centered. Even item wise, there's some item changes, but none of them are AD carry item changes. Game modes, bug fixes, and so really the only other thing to talk about is that there are some Star Guardians that are in fact played in the bottom lane, so you might want to watch out for them or might be playing with them. For example, Kai'Sa. You might have to deal with Kai'Sa, the Kai'Sa matchup. She didn't really get any buffs though, so the matchup is still the same, but you might be seeing her more because Star Guardian Kai'Sa is going to be a thing. Same with Nyla. Because again, they're the melee marksmen, and they're also getting a skin for this huge event that's going down too, so you're probably going to see them regardless. But if you see them, you're also going to see the Star Guardian skin. Look up skin spotlights to see what the effects in game look like of that skin, so nothing kind of really confuses you. It's like, oh, I couldn't even register what that was. And then Sona. You might be playing against Sona, but you might be playing with a Sona as your support because Star Guardian Sona is going to be a thing. So how do you synergize as Jinx with Sona? Things like when she throws out the ultimate, you want to chain your CC. So don't throw the Flame Chompers immediately. Look up the cooldown or like how the stun duration is on Sona's ultimate. So that way if it's like 3 seconds, for example, you throw those Flame Chompers after about the 2-second mark so that by the time they arm and then snare somebody, that person's CC'd for a good 3.5, 4 seconds total, and they just don't get to play the game anymore. Stuff like that is what you want to look for when I'm talking about like chaining CC and synergies if you're playing with one. And if you're playing against one, you know, she still has one of the squishiest champions in the game at level 1 especially. So if you're playing with an aggressive support, especially like a Thresh or something, just kind of dogpile her, honestly. Level 1, rush the minions down so you hit level 2 before the enemy team bot lane hits level 2, and then you have the damage advantage for that, stuff like that. So that's going to be really all for this video. A bit of a short video, and it's still like, how does Jinx deal with some of these changes that could affect Jinx? But it's very, very light to nothing on Jinx content. But there you go, a little bit of a preview of the patch notes, so there you go. Thank you so much for watching the video. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the bell notification, because it's the actual subscribe button. But I don't know which video will be next, because life can have a lot of kinks. So till this time, take care. ggGetJinxed. Thank you for watching, and enjoy pizza responsibly.